Chapter 846. Find the Target. St. Samuel Cathedral behind Chanus Gate. Backland Archbishop St. Anthony stood at the staircase connecting the two different stories and watched as the Nighthawk deacons rushed about. Many of them wore red gloves. As a spokesperson for the Church of Evernight in the kingdom's capital, St. Anthony had a clean-shaven face. His face didn't betray his mood, and his deep black eyes similarly hid any upheavals he had. But everyone who passed by him would feel their souls tremble as an indescribable sense of horror arose in their hearts.
Your Grace, an inventory count has been made. None of the mysticism ingredients are missing, including the potion main ingredients, and, beyond their characteristics, Your Grace, all the potion formulas are in their original locations. It can be preliminarily determined that no one had gone through them in the last 8 hours. Your Grace, all of the prisoners imprisoned on the first level are accounted for. None of them escaped, nor did anyone pass away. Your Grace, none of the information or books suffered any damage or were moved. Your Grace, the Grade 2 and Grade 3 sealed artifacts are all present. None of them have been taken away. Your Grace, the 3 Grade 1 sealed artifacts remain in their sealed states. None of them show signs of having left their confines. Your Grace, the core seal remains intact and didn't suffer any damage. Your Grace, it has been confirmed that there are no new items in here. There are no remnant setups that bring about danger. Your Grace, we didn't find the enemy who disguised himself as a keeper. He seems to have evaporated into thin air.
One deacon after another came over to make a report as the matter gradually turned somewhat odd. They found it unimaginable that a scheming and powerful beyonder would take such an immense risk and set up such a tight plan and use all kinds of means to pass through Chanus Gate. Yet nothing was taken, and the perpetrator had left after circling the area once. This made it seem like the person was only trying to prove themselves, or it was someone who had specially come to find flaws in the surveillance of Chanus Gate for the church. The deacon who led a Red Gloves team surveyed the area and deliberated as he came up with a theory.
Your Grace, could it be the requirements of an advancement ritual of some sequence?
Having been on a mission to capture devils, he was accustomed to making such guesses, and from Sequence 5, different pathways and different sequences had different advancement rituals. The ones that the Church of Evernight was aware of wasn't a large number. If that were the case, Soest could already see the infiltrator's mockery grin that said, "I am free to go anywhere, even if it is the Church of Evernight's Chanus Gate. It is no different from a department store. Those Nighthawks will only become enraged after the matter, feeling useless."
He has to be caught.
Soest silently clenched his red-gloved hand. St. Anthony was just about to say something when Nighthawk Deacon, Daily Simone, raised a second possibility.
Perhaps the infiltrator had attempted to take some sealed artifact away and suffered the negative effects. He died on the spot and was cleanly devoured?
St. Anthony nodded in thought and said,
"I'll head to basement 3 to take a look."
With that said, he steadily walked to basement 2 and, in a secret location, activated the path to basement 3. The other deacons were lacking in rank or clearance, so all they could do was wait in their spots. St. Anthony quickly arrived at basement 3, which didn't span too big an area. He basically confirmed that sealed artifacts 1-29 and 1-80 hadn't undergone any abnormal changes. Following the strict protocols, he observed 1-80 with 1-29 and found 0-17 lying inside with eyes half open, just like always. During this process, St. Anthony approached thrice and opened a distance from it thrice. Sometimes he changed where he stood, and at other times he cloaked himself in the darkness of the night. He didn't dare skip the necessary steps. Even as a saint, he didn't dare belittle any of the items in here. Ignoring the powers that would break out of its vessel, temporarily causing the seal on 0-17, even 1-29 and 1-80, which were rather dangerous items, to become ineffective. St. Anthony didn't wish to degenerate into an amnesiac who had to relearn how to eat and drink, much less become part of a dream that existed between reality and illusions.
There's nothing wrong.
Anthony heaved a silent sigh of relief. He began restoring the two sealed artifacts to their original states. A few minutes later, the Nighthawk deacons saw the Archbishop return. St. Anthony said, his pronunciation of died being somewhat muffled.
The infiltrator might have died from touching a sealed artifact.
He didn't give any additional explanations as he instructed.
Regardless, this matter needs to be investigated. The infiltrator might have a partner. To be able to infiltrate St. Samuel Cathedral without causing a stir, it means that the target is very familiar with this place and is familiar with the recent duty shifts of the keepers. He's very familiar with how Nighthawks handle and take over matters, and has the ability or an item to change his appearance. In addition, he had obtained the help from a Beyonder with a sacred Evernight Pathway item, or has one himself. Putting all these conditions together, investigate the servants and priests to see if they have encountered any indistinct spirit channeling or enticement. Check if the bishops have betrayed the goddess, as well as the believers who have recently come to the cathedral on a regular basis. At the same time, check on all the believers in the surroundings of their residences. Perhaps they had unexpectedly divulged something and had something stolen. I'll carry out the investigations pertaining to you. Also, find the missing servant and see if there are any clues.
Soest and the other Nighthawk deacons answered in unison.
Yes, Your Grace.
In the office, with a tense mood, Leonard Mitchell wasn't having his feet up on the table like usual. He sat very properly and wore a rather solemn expression. This was the second time he had encountered a matter that targeted items behind Channis Gate. It invoked the memories that he buried deep inside his heart, and more importantly, he had encountered the fake keeper before without realizing the problem.
If I were a little stronger and had better observation skills, perhaps it might not have.
Leonard Mitchell's lips pursed tightly as he looked at the documents in front of him, but he wasn't reading a single word. This continued until his teammates entered. The red glove that entered said to everyone in the room,
That keeper has awoken. He didn't see the infiltrator, and only knew that he encountered the possession ability of a wraith.
How can a wraith move about inside the cathedral?
Many red gloves raised the question, but no one had an answer.
Perhaps that wraith believes in the goddess.
Leonard mumbled inwardly. While no one was paying attention to him in the corner, he suppressed his voice and seemed to mutter,
Old man, didn't you discover anything abnormal back then?
The slightly aged voice sounded in his mind.
It's not like I'll observe the outside world all the time, especially when I'm near Channis Gate.
Leonard didn't dare ask further as he joined in the discussion with his teammates. Before long, the Red Gloves team captain Soest entered the room and threw a stack of dossiers on the desk.
These are the targets we need to investigate. The bishops have provided the names of the believers who have frequently come to the cathedral recently.
Leonard glanced at it, and towards the back was a dossier with a familiar name, Duane Dantes.
This old fellow that survived from the Fourth Epoch came to a nearby street for less than 2 months, and Channis Gate was infiltrated? Isn't that too much of a coincidence? Besides, he has been frequently coming to St. Samuel Cathedral. He might be observing the situation and figuring out the patterns. Old man's excuse wasn't too convincing, but if the infiltrator was Duane Dantes, then everything makes sense. He's afraid that he would expose himself and pretended not to discover anything abnormal.
Leonard's mind instantly filled with many ideas as he asked in deliberation,
Captain Soest, what did the infiltrator take? What clues did he leave behind?
Soest surveyed the room and said,
Nothing was taken or left behind. It was like no one stepped inside. His Grace suspects that he died or was vaporized from contact with some sealed artifact. Our priority is to find his partner.
No, Duane Dantes wouldn't die that easily. He's a monster who has lived since the Fourth Epoch. However, why did he carry out the infiltration?
Leonard frowned slightly as he hesitated for a moment. Then, he proactively included Duane Dantes into the investigation targets for himself and 2 other teammates. After the Red Gloves and local Nighthawks began taking action, Leonard found an excuse to head to the washroom first. He suppressed his voice and asked,
What are your thoughts about Duane Dantes?
He didn't expose his parasite's lie. Huden, the elderly voice, chuckled and said,
Didn't I tell you? I don't know much about him. I only know that there's something special about him. His aura has something ancient about it. However, the case you previously investigated gave me some inspiration. I suspect that Dwayne Dantes might be related to that matter. He might be a proxy of some existence.
Leonard muttered softly in surprise.
What matter? Which existence?
In his mind, the ancient voice replied with an odd tone,
A fool that doesn't belong to this era.
160 Bauckland Street. Klein had his breakfast and returned to the balcony's half-open room. He sat in his reclining chair and raised his hand to rub his temples. After his tense mood subsided, Klein discovered that his mind had turned somewhat adrift. He would often see the hanging corpses in the ancient cathedral, as well as the cluster of translucent maggots that remained unclear in his deepest memories. Illusory voices would seem to constantly echo in his ears. Hornacis, Phlegrea.
Although I had quickly cut the connection with my marionette, I had suffered some of the effects. My soul has been slightly corrupted, as expected of a real mythical creature. After the preliminary investigations are done, I'll have to find a way to resolve the remnant problems.
Klein slowly heaved a sigh of relief and used cogitation to calm himself. Chapter 847. The Name Hidden in the Dossiers. A carriage passed by Bauckland Street as Leonard Mitchell and two Red Gloves teammates discussed the target they were investigating this time, Dwayne Dantes. Cindy, who had long wine-red hair, introduced her findings.
I still haven't had any direct contact with this gentleman. I've only investigated his servants and neighbors. For now, it has been confirmed that Dwayne Dantes has acted the same since last night to this morning. He went to his bedroom to sleep at 11 and finished washing up at 7:30 in the morning. At times, he would have some supper and end the day after midnight. At times, he would wake up before 7 and head out for a stroll, but that's not the norm.
Another Red Glove, Bob, nodded and said,
From this point of view, there's nothing wrong with Dwayne Dantes.
Leonard Mitchell, who sat in a seemingly casual manner, immediately said with a smile,
But the reverse can also be true. According to what we've currently gathered, the missing servant was likely replaced between 11:20 and 11:35 last night. The infiltrator entered Chanis Gate at 6 in the morning, and we discovered the problem at 7:20 ante-meridiem without finding the target. It can thus be said that during the infiltration, Dwayne Dantes was sleeping and lacked an alibi.
What you say makes sense.
Cindy glanced at Leonard in surprise. Her impression of this teammate of hers was one who often had a judgment or question that pointed at the core of the problem. However, he seldom described his logic in great detail. He was more like a desultory poet who occasionally had epiphanies. Bob, who had a sharp chin, frowned as he shook his head.
If that's the case, everyone on this name list cannot be cleared of suspicion. They were sleeping with no one watching them. Even if they have wives or husbands, they would similarly be sleeping at such times. Also, I don't believe an infiltrator would be so bold. He had already entered Chanis Gate and managed to successfully escape, completing an unimaginable feat. Yet he stays nearby and hasn't abandoned his identity or gone far away. How is this possible? The risk involved cannot be predicted unless he's also planning something else. Or he can't bear to part with certain things. But what can compare with infiltrating Chanis Gate? What can compare with those sealed artifacts, ingredients, and formulas?
Leonard had already thought of an explanation as he crossed his right leg.
If I didn't know that Dwayne Dantes was problematic in the first place, I would have come to the same conclusion. I'm just saying why we can't so easily strike off Dwayne Dantes from the suspects. Besides, Captain Solist has said it. The infiltrator might have already died behind Chanis Gate. Even if Dwayne Dantes isn't involved, he might very well be an accomplice. Don't you find it too much of a coincidence? He moved in for less than 2 months, and the church encountered something that might never happen in centuries. Besides, he has been visiting St. Samuel Cathedral too frequently. He had ample opportunities to figure out the corresponding situation. Also, during this period of time, there was a strange sewer explosion along Bauckland Street.
Cindy bunched up her long, wine-red hair and said,
You've convinced me. This should be a target that we put our focus on.
Bob pulled at the ends of his left palm's red glove and said,
There are indeed many coincidences. However, coincidences might not be equivalent to problems. Even if Dwayne Dantes goes to the cathedral daily and listens to the bishop's preachings, all he could do is understand the layout and not obtain deeper information, such as when the keepers will head to Channis Gate and how the handover is done with the Nighthawks.
Therefore, he's more likely to be one of the accomplices.
Leonard said with a shrug. He similarly didn't understand how Dwayne Dantes would understand the internal protocols of the Nighthawks so well. Claude, Cindy echoed.
Regardless, we have to do a deeper investigation. Shall we wait till noon and directly enter Dwayne Dantes' dream to question him? He has the habit of taking afternoon naps.
Leonard raised his right hand and waved it gently.
There's no need to be in such a hurry. It's not like we've never done any routine inspections in the past or entered his dreams, but we didn't discover anything wrong. If there really is nothing wrong with him, we wouldn't gain anything from entering his dream again. If there's a problem with him, the fact that he didn't expose himself back then means he has the means to resist an inquiry during the dream. We will still be fooled by him if we enter his dream again. Therefore, we should monitor him and see what kind of people he interacts with, so as to prevent him from escaping while waiting for Desi's response about this tycoon's true identity. Once we discover any clues, we will request to use a higher-level investigation method than questioning him in dreams.
Cindy was once again surprised, as she couldn't help but joke.
It's rare to see you analyze the situation so seriously.
Furthermore, his thought processes were extremely clear. Leonard fell silent and gave a self-deprecating comment.
Perhaps it's because I've encountered something similar.
Instantly, Cindy felt that Leonard's green eyes had turned darker. She didn't speak further.
Let's take turns to monitor Dwayne Dantes. I'll go first. All right.
Leonard nodded and turned to Bob.
Get the case files on the sewer explosion. Let's see if we can discover any problems. I'll head back to read through the corresponding dossiers and see if there are any other abnormalities on this street.
After splitting the work, the three red gloves began their work. Leonard returned to St. Samuel Cathedral's basement and obtained the information involving Balkland Street and the cases that the Aurora Order had actively or passively involved themselves in for the past 3 years. The latter was something that sparked off the clue provided by the parasite in him. It gave him an idea.
Since the Fool's existence and the corresponding honorific name initially came from the Aurora Order, it means that the Aurora Order was involved in something or had suffered some setbacks. It might be related to the organization that believes in the Fool.
After returning to the office, Leonard held back his desultory attitude as he very seriously read through the thick dossiers. In the dossiers related to the Aurora Order, there was the Lenevis case he was most familiar with. This true creator's descent had failed terribly because of some baffling report. A mysterious person had appeared to kill the main criminal. He was suspected to be related to Hero Bandit Black Emperor. As he targeted evil criminals, he would scatter tarot cards over the target's corpse. That person wasn't able to do it for Desire Apostle Jason Barea only because Leonard had rushed over too quickly. Similarly, Leonard once again saw the name Sherlock Moriarty appear in the periphery of the case. Aurora Order's Mr. X was assassinated at the gathering he convened. There were traces of powers at the demigod level left at the scene. At this point in time, Dwayne Dantes had already arrived in Backland. It matches perfectly. Aurora Order's Mr. A and the demoness sect cooperated to create the Great Smog of Backland. This person vanished as a result. Aurora Order's Mr. A had assassinated the Intis ambassador. Leonard read case after case, but he didn't find anything of use. He rubbed his temples and decided to attack it from a different angle. He began from the cases related to Hero Bandit Black Emperor.
Lenevis case. First murder scene with the tarot cards thrown as a ritual. And the Fool is the beginning of the tarot cards. Capim's case. From the strength and level showcased by Hero Bandit Black Emperor, he won't and wouldn't mimic others. He similarly scattered tarot cards on the corpse. Desire Apostle Jason Barea. I saw Hero Bandit Black Emperor with my own eyes, preventing him from scattering the cards in time.
Apart from major events and evil criminals, what other connection do these three cases have? Leonard had previously considered the relevant questions and was certain that Detective Sherlock Moriarty had been partially involved in the Lenavis and Capine cases.
Then what about the Desire Apostle case?
Leonard found the addendum and began leafing through them. Finally, he spotted a line in an inconspicuous spot. People attacked involved Isengard Stanton, Sherlock Moriarty. Leonard's expression slowly turned excited, as though he had discovered a breakthrough. He flipped through the Aurora Order dossier and didn't miss out any of the names involved. He kept expanding his search and requested for all the dossiers that involved every name.
Aurora orders Mr. A assassinated the Antis ambassador. The Antis ambassador was in charge of the conflict over the Difference Engine manuscripts. The clues to the manuscripts came from a spy who usually acted as a private detective. It is reported that another private detective was embroiled in this matter and had nearly been killed by a gang member under the command of the Annotis ambassador, another private detective.
Leonard suddenly stood up as he left St. Samuel Cathedral and headed for the police station that handled the case back then. Although most of the dossiers had been taken away by MI9, Leonard still found the name of the person who had made the police report, Sherlock Moriarty. Leonard thought, as the corners of his lips curled up, he decided to immediately search for more information to verify his conjecture.
I now have reason to believe that this great detective was also involved in the Great Smog of Backland. Among the various people who are involved, his name appears, right at the periphery of the matter. He and Dwayne Dantes all belong to a secret organization that believes in the Fool.
160 Balkland Street, inside the master bedroom. Klein didn't have any nighthawks enter his dream during his afternoon nap, but he once again returned to the foggy town. He saw Demoness of Despair Panatia with her smile showcasing blood-colored flesh in between the gaps of her teeth. He saw her slowly being hung up as her eyes rolled back in despair before her head drooped down. The hung corpses, the horrifying gigantic mushroom, the cluster of countless translucent maggots kept appearing one after another, waking Klein up from his dream. As he rubbed his temples, Klein found that his mind was in a terrible condition, and this wasn't a problem that could be resolved by the gray fog. He fell into deep thought and entered his bathroom and arrived above the gray fog. He conjured Gehrman and made him pray.
Please pass on my question to Miss Justice about when she will be free. I wish to receive some psychotherapy.
Chapter 848, Getting Caught in the Crossfire, Backland, Empress Borough, inside the Hall family's luxurious mansion. Audrey had just tried on 3 selections of evening gowns today, and she was sitting on a cushioned chair, wondering how they could be matched with her accessories and which one she was more inclined towards. She also pondered over her mother's opinion. At this moment, she suddenly saw an endless grayish-white and a blurry figure watching down at everything from high above a pier before her eyes. Immediately after that, she saw another figure. It was a praying figure that had been shrouded by the gray fog. Her ears resounded with the corresponding words. Instead of being alarmed, Audrey was delighted. Her unease and worry that there wasn't a tarot gathering today was instantly quelled.
As expected, it was nothing. Oh, Mr. World really has a psychological problem. He must have been under immense stress recently. It's no wonder he booked an appointment in advance.
Audrey sighed as she began to consider when she was free. As she pondered, she scanned the maids who were busy in her room and the golden retriever, Susie, who was sitting by the door. Audrey's lips curled up slightly in an irresistible manner as she bowed her head and secretly prayed in response.
Please tell Mr. World that I'm currently free. He can determine the time and location, as long as it's not nighttime and doesn't exceed the boroughs west of Backland.
In regards to this, the golden retriever who was observing the maids' work seemed to sense someone looking at her. She suspiciously turned her head and looked in Audrey's direction. However, it failed to discover any problems. Above the gray fog, inside the palace that looked like a giant's residence, sas. She's free at any time. Periods when it's convenient to head out. Won't leave places she's familiar with. Klein rubbed his temples as he interpreted Miss Justice's reply. His first reaction was that it was best done today or tomorrow, and to have her determine the location. Then, he could use creeping hunger to teleport there. But he soon thought of a problem.
Duane Dantes was part of the Nighthawks investigations. It was very possible that he was being monitored. Therefore, rashly traveling could easily expose him. Wait a few days or...
Klein seriously thought about it as he conjured the World Gairman Sparrow and prayed once again.
Please inform Miss Justice that let's do it today. Above the gray fog.
Ah? Audrey's eyes widened. She found that the answer provided by Mr. World exceeded her expectations.
How is she supposed to get Susie to be her stand-in? Besides, there are many details that I'm unable to see or clearly sense while inside Mr. Fool's palace. It will seriously hamper any psychotherapy.
Audrey calmed her sense of alarm as she posed her doubts from a position of viability and requested Mr. Fool to pass it on to Mr. World. Before long, she received a reply again.
I will request Mr. Fool to remove those restrictions. We'll use other means to conceal our true appearances.
That can be done? This is the special treatment one gets from being Mr. Fool's blessed? Our continuous communication is almost like a conversation. I've really troubled Mr. Fool, and he seems to almost allow us to indulge in it.
Audrey's thoughts raced as she stopped finding excuses.
All right, let's do it between 11:30 to 12:30 tonight.
She didn't believe that she would have anywhere to be alone before the end of her birthday ball. At the same time, in a building at 39 Beauclin Street, Hazel was looking at the selected evening gown in boredom as she listened to her mother's repeated exhortations. She was to accompany her parents to attend Miss Audrey Hall's birthday ball. Just as Hazel's thoughts were wandering and her mind gradually turning blank, she saw a grayish-white rat appear by the door. It was frantically waving its paws. Purse. This. Hazel patiently listened to her mother repeat herself one more time before finding an excuse to return to her bedroom. After she closed and locked her door, the grayish-white rat appeared from somewhere and arrived by her feet. It sat there in a rather comical manner.
I've discovered something wrong with the surroundings.
The rat had sent vibrations in the air to speak with human words? Hazel wasn't surprised at that as she asked in puzzlement.
What's wrong?
The grayish-white rat raised its right forepaw and pointed out the window.
There are beyonders from the Church of Evernight investigating this street. It's at a rather large scale.
Hazel asked with slight frown.
What are they looking for?
The grayish-white rat slowly inhaled and said,
How would I know? But it's definitely something very serious. This way, they might very well discover something wrong with you.
Hazel asked, feeling somewhat worried and confused.
How did they make the discovery? Weren't the clues in the sewers blasted away? Weren't the corresponding problems dealt with?
The grayish-white was momentarily unsure about what to say. A few seconds later, it vaguely replied,
Official Beyonders have plenty of strange but effective investigation methods. In short, I'll have to deal with your dream. This is where it's easiest to divulge things.
Hazel looked down at the rat as her knitted brows relaxed.
All right, then.
Don't look so unwilling. It wasn't easy for me to accumulate this bit of strength, and now it's going to waste once again. Is this street cursed? First, it was that demoness with a strange condition. Following that hero bandit Black Emperor appeared. Now, there's some baffling and unknown situation that made the Nighthawks pay serious attention to this street.
The grayish-white rat squeaked in frustration. At 7:30 in the evening, Hazel accompanied her parents, Member of Parliament Macht and Lady Rihanna, to Empress Borough and entered the Hall family's residence. As it was a birthday ball today, she didn't manage to directly meet Miss Audrey Hall. All she did was quietly stay by her parents' side as they exchanged pleasantries with Earl Hall, Lady Caitlin, and Lord Hibbert Hall. To her, these respected aristocrats were, in essence, the same as commoners. Therefore, she didn't appear notably reserved. Her actions and tone were rather liberal. If it wasn't because of her mother's repeated exhortations, Hazel even believed that the beautiful dance floor, the murals with high artistic value, and the elegant and outstanding statues were more worthy of respect. As she smiled at the people she knew and didn't know, Hazel finally waited until the ball began. She saw the star of tonight's show. Miss Audrey Hall held the arms of the Earl and Earl's wife as she walked out of the room on the second floor before arriving at the railings that faced the dance floor. Hazel scanned her and habitually ignored her appearance as she observed the matching of her gown and accessories. However, her gaze wasn't able to move away. On the chandelier hanging high above, whale oil candles produced light that came with dreamy colors. When shining on the 18-year-old Audrey, it made her emerald-like eyes, pure and indescribable face, and lustrous gold hair seem to glow. It made her gown and accessories lose their luster. Hazel was momentarily caught in a daze. She failed to hear what Earl Hall had said until the melody filled the floor as she snapped out of her daze when Audrey Hall began the opening dance with the Earl. The always proud her had suddenly felt a little inferior. She felt that even if this striking lady didn't possess any beyond her powers, there was no way Audrey was inferior to her. Hazel pursed her lips and looked around. She realized that everyone's gaze had been grabbed. The only difference was that they all had different feelings about the situation. Phew. Hazel heaved a sigh of relief. Hashir. That night, she didn't act that arrogantly again. However, she yearned to leave at every minute of the night. She wanted to head home to busy herself with her matters, to obtain more magical and powerful abilities. Finally, the ball came to an end as Hazel's family bade farewell to the family and walked to the door. On the way out, Hazel couldn't help but look back. She saw Miss Audrey standing along the sides of the dance floor with a faint and beautiful smile as she expressed her gratitude to each and every guest that was about to leave. She seemed to remain under the spotlight. After the end of the birthday ball, Audrey took off her accessories and changed into her sleeping gown before entering her bathroom. As she looked at the white steam emanate with her bathrobe beside her, Audrey wasn't in a rush to soak herself inside. She first sat in the corner and prayed to Mr. Fool to indicate that she was ready. In about 10 seconds, she saw crimson light surge at her like a tidal wave, drowning her. Above the gray fog, Audrey appeared by the side of the long bronze table. This time, she didn't see Mr. Fool, who was enshrouded in gray fog. She discovered an ancient confessional. It was a brown crate that was 1.5 times the height of a person. There were doors on both sides, and a wooden plank separated the area in between them.
I thought Mr. World would request Mr. Fool to conjure a wall which we will use to communicate across. Although it's essentially the same, a confessional is cramped and dark. He really doesn't know how to consider a lady's feelings. Yes, I would find it odd if Mr. World did that.
As Audrey suffused a smile, she walked to the ajar door of the confessional. She bent her back and entered before sitting down with her legs bent sideways. After closing the wooden door, Audrey, who was treating a patient in the true sense of the word for the first time, suddenly felt a little excited. Immersed in darkness, the environment and her mood made her loosen up from the many rules she had to abide by. She curled her lips and reached out her fingers and gently tapped on the wooden partition.
Hello, Tilda, Mr. World. Are you there?
Sitting cross-legged opposite her, Klein was infected by Miss Justice's cheerful tone. His emotions relaxed as he said,
You may begin.
This time, he didn't use the gray fog to enshroud himself, but had turned himself into Gairman Sparrow.
Indeed, Mr. World's mental state isn't too good. He's too tense and worried.
Audrey sensed him first, and then used a psychiatrist's placate. A gentle, invisible wave emanated over her, as Klein instantly felt a cool, refreshing morning breeze blow at him during a hot summer day. The frustrations and feverish feelings within him suddenly vanished. Seeing Mr. World having made an obvious recovery, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked softly,
Have you had any nightmares lately?
Chapter 849, Consultation Fees. Nightmare? Klein deliberated for 2 seconds and said,
Yes. I dream of a town that's enshrouded in fog. The crimson moon in the sky would be clear and blurred at random. In the middle of the town is a black cathedral. Corpses are hung up inside. They wear clothes from different eras as they sway in the wind and produce strange sounds. Apart from that, There's a beautiful lady whose gaps in her teeth were filled with blood-colored human flesh, a mushroom man, formed of countless tiny mushrooms.
To treat his psychological problems, Klein reconstructed his dream in a rather complete manner. However, he didn't say that he had encountered those things in reality, nor divulge that he knew the beautiful lady's identity and the strange mushroom's origins. At the same time, he hid the existence of the cluster of translucent maggots and Zaratul. Audrey listened intently and seriously. Based on her beyond her intuition and knowledge from mysticism and psychological, she said as she contemplated,
Mr. World, I can imagine such a terrifying and sinister dream. I can also experience the immense horror that it brings you.
Seeing that there wasn't any rebuttal from the other side of the wooden partition, Audrey grew in confidence. She silently did another round of placate and began guiding.
The horror that appears in dreams will often stem from feelings hidden deep in one's heart, and there are only two sources of horror in one's heart. One is the unknown, and the second is what cannot be resisted. The terrifying things you see in your dream are only superficial. What you are really afraid of is what they represent and symbolize, the truth hidden behind them.
As she spoke, Audrey suddenly asked,
What is it?
Klein was gradually relaxing and scrutinizing himself as he took in Miss Justice's gentle and sweet voice. When he suddenly heard this question, he subconsciously answered,
The existence that created all of that.
He paused and hesitantly added,
They are both an unknown and also cannot be resisted.
At this point, Klein knew why he was having nightmares, as well as the true reason for his terrible mental state. He instinctively felt horrified over certain matters and instinctively had latent negative emotions. The former included the cluster of translucent maggots and Zaratul's terrifying performance. There was also the Eraser Angel's baffling actions and the fact that using the dark sacred emblem was the key to opening the door. They separately created a mood of despair that seemed impossible to resist, as well as the feeling of not knowing who was friend or foe and their ploys.
Yes, I'm fearful that the cluster of translucent maggots that's suspected to be a Sequence 1 attendant of Mysteries of the Seer pathway. I'm fearful of Zaratul, who has accomplished an unknown objective by opening the door. I'm fearful of the goddess whose thoughts are an unknown, as well as the Eraser Angel.
Klein slowly exhaled as he admitted his fears. Audrey used placate once again and discovered that Mr. World's tense mind had essentially relaxed. She was delighted as she boldly said,
One of the biggest sources of fear is a lack of confidence. Try recalling if you had any oversight or had committed any mistakes in the related matter. This results in your spirit repeatedly warning you and hinting to you. It eventually transformed into part of the nightmare.
Oversight and mistakes. Warning from my spirit.
Klein pondered over Miss Justice's words and seriously began organizing the details of the matters that resulted in his horror. Soon his expression turned heavy, bit by bit, as he discovered a problem.
I swore an oath with the goddess bearing witness via the holy sword. Although I hadn't become a clown, with the Grey Fog's powers yet to have entered the real world, preventing me from being noticed by special deities, demigods, and spirit world creatures. However, I couldn't fool fate, which would also be Beyonders of the Monster pathway. And the goddess has another title. She is the Empress of Misfortune and Horror. She wields control over misfortune and is one of the deities in the domain of fate. Therefore, I was noticed from back then?
Klein's heart sank bit by bit as the horror that stemmed from the unknown was greatly alleviated. He didn't reply, nor did he wait for Miss Justice to speak again. He switched to asking,
If you will face one, or even many difficult-to-challenge enemies, what would you do?
Audrey wasn't annoyed by her patient's question. Instead, she felt that it was a good sign. After some deliberation, she said,
First, avoid them and hide. Try harder to improve yourself.
What if the time won from avoiding and hiding isn't enough to make you grow to a level that is sufficient enough to face your enemies?
Klein pressed.
What if the gap between the two is difficult to bridge?
Audrey answered him seriously, while also consoling him.
Find enough helpers.
Helpers.
Names suddenly flashed across Klein's mind as his heart felt a lot more settled. He then continued asking,
What if the enemies cannot be resisted even with helpers? What if there are helpers who are plotting something that might be beneficial to you, but they might also bring you harm?
Audrey drew a blank, and after 3 seconds of thought, she replied,
You can pray to a deity.
She nearly said to the world, You can seek Mr. Fool's help, and from the question and answer session, Audrey was able to confirm a matter. The mental problems that Mr. World was suffering stemmed from powerful and terrifying enemies, but there was a worry that, at a deeper level, the helpers had unknown stances.
Pray to a deity.
Klein didn't dare to directly say, what if deities couldn't resolve it, because the thoughts of deities are even harder to fathom. After all, this was the fool's kingdom, and he was a blessed. He organized his words and said,
Deities can only provide help in certain areas. And what if that isn't enough?
Audrey originally wanted to say that there was always a way, and that good was bound to defeat evil, but she couldn't convince herself of it. She couldn't provide any relevant case studies, so eventually she pursed her lips and said,
I don't know.
In the confessional, it was a still darkness. The two temporarily stopped speaking as they fell into their respective inner struggles. Finally, Audrey broke the silence and looked at the wooden partition.
Regardless, something needs to be done. Work hard at it. You can't just give up like that and not put up a fight.
That's right. At the very least, I still have many secrets and things to rely on.
Klein closed his eyes as he leaned on the wooden plank. His thoughts slowly rewound from the most recent events. As he was no longer constantly tense and often frustrated, Audrey sensed his change and immediately added a placate. With that, Klein's mental condition was completely restored back to normal.
I feel much better. Thank you for your treatment. What kind of consultation fee do you want?
Klein offered.
Actually, I should be the one thanking you for providing me an opportunity to handle a case.
Audrey didn't really wish to collect any fees as she looked at the wooden partition in the darkness. She couldn't help but recall Mr. World's usual gloominess and coldness, as well as his experienced and ruthless demeanor. His mental problems likely also have to do with his personality. Audrey suddenly had an idea as she smiled.
The consultation fee that I charge isn't much at all. Yeah, wish me happiness.
What's going on?
Klein was momentarily stunned. He nearly forgot he was wearing the facade of Gehrman Sparrow. This was a request he had never heard of before. Klein hesitated for a moment. Finally, he pretended to coldly say with the world's identity,
Since you requested, I wish you happiness.
Audrey's smile turned into a beaming smile.
I wish you happiness too. Mr. World, don't always keep everything inside. Smile more and be happier. It can eliminate most of the latent problems. All right, your mental problems have been resolved, but you will need a follow-up appointment in 3 days or by next week.
Klein was at a loss for an answer as he tersely acknowledged an affirmation. Then, he heard the door on the other side creak open. With the fool's angle, he saw Miss Justice retreat from the confessional and straighten her body. After sending her to the real world, Klein didn't dare stay above the gray fog for too long. He quickly left and got into bed. At that moment, his mental condition had been restored. With his body and mind at ease, he realized something. He had digested quite a bit of his marionettist potion. The progress had surpassed his expectations.
This is because I relied on my marionette to fool a demigod, Panatia, and orchestrated her and Mr. A to complete my planned-out performance at the foggy town. Therefore, apart from trying to hide behind the shadows and let every marionette have their own persona to make it more realistic, the marionettist principles include use one's marionette as a guide to control the enemy to play the role of a puppet.
Klein thought as he muttered inwardly in thought. He believed that he could digest the potion before the end of the year. He exhaled with mixed feelings as he turned his head and looked at the crimson moonlight that penetrated the curtains as he silently said,
That missing servant should have been found. The clues I left behind should have been discovered as well.
In the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard, Cindy, Bob, and company looked at Captain Soest, who had returned from a meeting, as they patiently waited for him to introduce new clues. Soest drank a mouthful of aromatic coffee and said,
"The missing servant has been found, and in the room he was left in, there were some clothes left behind by the infiltrator. It has been confirmed that it belongs to the crazy adventurer Gehrman Sparrow, who had previously been active at sea."
Why did it involve another crazy adventurer?
Leonard was somewhat puzzled as he directly asked,
When did he come to Backland?
No one knows. The only thing that can be confirmed is that this crazy adventurer had appeared at sea in the recent 3 weeks and had hunted 3 pirates.
Soest said in an unhurried tone.
The Church of Storms knows more. MI9 also seems to know quite a bit. The higher-ups will send people to liaise with them.
Just as Soest finished his briefing, a telegram was sent over. It came from the Nighthawks in Desi. The content, which was decoded, read, "Duane Dantes's present identity is fake. In the past 10 years he spent in the southern continent, he had relied on adventuring to amass a significant amount of wealth. Further confirmation will require some time. As this place is very chaotic and there are often wars, the jurisdiction of zones are frequently changed." Chapter 850, The Devil is in the Details. Sounds like a contrived story. Ever since the new sea route was discovered, there has been no end to stories of people becoming rich from taking risks, Soest casually commented on the content of the telegram. As he thought, he looked towards a particular red glove.
I recall that we had investigated Duane Dantes before and had an exchange with him in his dream.
Yes, the red glove, who was responsible for the task, nodded and replied.
I didn't directly ask him about such matters, but I could tell that Duane Dantes was very familiar with the southern continent. He had plenty of experience there.
Heh, that might be information that Duane Dantes deliberately revealed to you.
Leonard had his doubts regarding the contents of the telegram, believing that this was another layer of disguise from an undying monster who had lived since the Fourth Epoch. However, he didn't inform his teammates about his conjectures, because he had no basis for them. Soest didn't pay great attention to the matter as he said,
Do you have any problems with the clues related to Gehrman Sparrow?
Since this crazy adventurer was still at sea in recent weeks, when did he come to Backland?
As a nightmare, Cindy repeated her doubts.
What I'm concerned about isn't the exact time, but whether he has the time to travel to Backland. After all, we're rather far from the sea.
Soest nodded gently and said,
In the meeting, a deacon raised this question. According to the time and venue of Gehrman Sparrow's last sighting, he normally has no way to arrive in Backland last night and complete an infiltration. Of course, I'm referring to normal circumstances. The missing servant told us that when he was sweeping the square, he suddenly lost control of his body. He froze on the spot and was unable to cry for help. Then, he saw bright colors like an abstract oil painting, and he felt that his body was floating upwards. Later, he lost consciousness, and after awakening, he found himself in a room in East Borough. The former matches with the keeper's description of being possessed by a wraith. The latter is suspected to be a traveler's teleport. If it really is teleport, then Gehrman Sparrow can appear in Backland at any moment.
As elites of the Nighthawks, the Red Gloves knew about the various Beyonder pathways far better than their colleagues, which were at the same level. They were no strangers to wraiths and travelers. After listening to the captain's explanation, another Red Glove added in thought,
It's rumored that Admiral of Blood, who was hunted by Gehrman Sparrow, is a wraith.
The details matched, and as for Gehrman Sparrow being able to obtain the powers to become a wraith, it wasn't unacceptable. The easiest method was to find an artisan to make one's prey into a mystical item. Cindy recalled even more information with this stimulus.
It's said that Gehrman Sparrow has the ability to change his appearance, and the infiltrator had disguised himself as the keeper.
Another detail matched. Excellent thinking. Soest raised his hand to rub his temples.
According to these details, we can come to a preliminary consensus that the infiltrator is Gehrman Sparrow, and this way, the name list we came up with might be erroneous. Gehrman Sparrow doesn't need a companion to frequently come to the cathedral to pray to gather information. He can change his appearance every day and enter to figure out the situation. This will be more indiscreet than using a companion.
As the largest and most holy church of Evernight Cathedral in Backland, the number of believers that came to St. Samuel Cathedral on a daily basis was too numerous to count. No bishop could remember every unfamiliar face that they once met.
That also means that the names we have here are meaningless?
Leonard raised his hand to rub his brows, sounding rather desultory.
That's somewhat obvious. Our focus now should be on Gehrman Sparrow. The other targets can be placed aside as we perform the most basic level of surveillance.
Having said that, Soest clapped and said,
All right, get busy.
Leonard didn't have any objections. He happened to hope to find the machinery hive mind, mandated punishers, and MI9 to gather some information. On Tuesday morning, Klein woke up naturally, feeling relaxed and calm. He had the feeling of joyful emotions slowly coming to life.
A psychiatrist beyond her powers are quite useful, after all. It really matches the extremely infectious optimism that Miss Justice brings with her.
Klein got out of bed and drew the curtains. He leisurely took in the scenery outside and the scattering golden sunlight. He regained his drive and began formulating his plans for the next couple months and even the year.
First, get a new marionette. Second, use the identity of Dwayne Dantes and the control over a marionette to orchestrate scripts to expedite the digestion of the potion. Third, during this process, slowly gather the ingredients needed for the Bizarro Sorcerer potion. In that regard, I can ask Little Son about the Bizarro Bane to see if he has any clues. I'll seek Mr. Azek's help regarding the Spirit World Plunderer. After all, the underworld is part of the spirit world. Fourth, I'll continue investigating the Great Smog of Backland and find the true culprit. This includes Ince Zangwill, as well as the demigod that killed Crazy Captain. There aren't any targets more suitable than them for my advancement ritual. However, I have to be careful of 008. I have to constantly keep watch of any intentional coincidences. I'll just dabble in the matter in an ordinary manner and mainly provide support. The dangerous investigations can be handed to Demoness Trissy.
Klein's thought processes slowly became clear. Although he still felt worried and fearful, this no longer affected his mental state and capacity to take action. Retracting his gaze from outside the balcony, Klein walked into the bathroom and washed up. Soon, he opened the door while feeling highly spirited, and he saw his valet, Richardson, and butler, Walter, waiting outside. The gentleman was wearing white gloves as he politely bowed and said,
Good morning, sir. There's only one item on your schedule today. It's to join an event at the East Balham Military Veterans Mess with Member of Parliament Macht at 3 in the afternoon. He's a new Member of Parliament, so by accepting his invitation, it will also indicate your political inclinations. You still have the opportunity to be hesitant about it.
Klein thought for a moment before saying,
There's no need. It's my choice.
He paused and asked in an inquiring tone,
It will be my first time visiting the East Balham Military Veterans Mess. What should I take note of?
Praise their work that they have established in East Balham. Use this opportunity to make some donations. There's no need to give too much or little. £500 is a rather suitable sum.
Walter provided his opinion.
£500. Seriously, no matter which circle I enter, I'll have to spend large sums of money. This is because Dwayne Dantes doesn't have any birthright or background. He can only open a path with cash.
Klein nodded gently and agreed with his butler's suggestion. At the same time, he quickly did account of his present assets.
The artisan hasn't completed the work regarding the Ocean Songster, but the money for Mentor of Disorder and Druid has been obtained. That's a total of £16,000. With the cash I originally had on hand, subtracting the £13,000 I used to purchase 3% of the Coin Company's shares, as well as the daily expenses of a tycoon's household and the donations at the cathedral, there's still £23,985 and 5 gold coins left. In addition, I still owe Miss Messenger 3,413 gold coins. £500 has already exceeded 2% of the cash I have on hand.
Klein didn't speak further as he walked out of his bedroom, going to the second floor where the dining room was in order to have his breakfast. In the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard Mitchell returned to his office earlier than his teammates. He had already obtained the relevant information and had learned of an inconspicuous matter. Prince Edisac, who passed away in the Great Smog of Backland, had once hired a private detective to investigate the death of equestrian teacher Talim Dumont. And that private detective's name was Sherlock Moriarty.
As expected, there are hints of him being involved with the Great Smog of Backland.
Leonard was delighted as he excitedly ruffled his hair. Following that, he pounded down at the documents on his desk with his fist, planning to seek out even more clues. However, he suddenly fell silent for about 8 seconds before raising his cup in embarrassment and drank a mouthful of coffee. He mumbled inwardly,
What did I want to do? I forgot about it after the pounding.
After some careful recall, Leonard finally recalled what it was. He pulled out his drawer and took out a deck of tarot cards. Then he found the Fool card and placed it on a piece of paper. On it, he wrote 3 names: Sherlock Moriarty, Gehrman Sparrow, Duane Dantes. After some hesitation, Leonard drew a line linking the 3 names to the Fool card, indicating that they might very well be members of a secret organization that believed in the Fool. Among them, he was most unsure of Gehrman Sparrow's identity as he wrote a question mark. Later, Leonard took out the Emperor card and stuck it beside the name Sherlock Moriarty. He labeled it suspected to be.
Gehrman Sparrow and Duane Dantes each correspond to a card?
Leonard muttered silently. He took out the crazy adventurer's records and began reading them seriously. Suddenly, he found a date very familiar. Early January! Gehrman Sparrow's first appearance was in early January.
No way.
Leonard drew a gasp as he flipped through another set of documents. At the end of it were the words, At the end of December, Sherlock Moriarty left Backland and headed south for a vacation. He is yet to return.
End of December. Early January. Backland. Pritz Harbor. Gehrman Sparrow can change his appearance. No way?
Leonard mumbled inwardly as he drew a dotted equality sign between Sherlock Moriarty and Gehrman Sparrow.
This great detective is the key.
Leonard found Sherlock Moriarty's portrait that he had drawn via a ritual as he carefully looked at it. After considering the point that looks could be changed, he began imagining the detective in different disguises. As he did it, Leonard's gaze froze bit by bit as he couldn't help but frown.